All right, gentlemen, how's it going? This is your main man, Scott McKay, coming at you again with another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast from XMY Communications. Gentlemen, you can find me at Scott McKay on Substack, on X, on YouTube, just about all those social media places, except on Instagram, where I'm at Real Scott McKay. You know, already I talk about this till I'm blue in the face. I'm blue in the shirt today. I've been talking about it so much. If you guys are watching on video, if you're not a part of the Mountaintop Summit Facebook group yet, you really should be, because the guys on there are getting better with women and they're becoming better men in the process. And hey, man, you're missing out, and we're missing having you there until you show up. So that's the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. And of course, the mountaintoppodcast.com is the website where all the goodies associated with the show are always found. With me today is a new friend of mine. He is from Pikesville, Maryland, which is in the Baltimore area. And just a couple clicks up from where I went to high school, up Reisterstown Road in the Baltimore County vicinity. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Shlotkin, and he is the founder of Marriage Restoration Project, doing great work. And I want to welcome you to the show, Shlomo.
Thank you, Scott. It's nice to meet a fellow Baltimorean.
Yeah, a fellow Baltimorean, right?
Well,
you're a Ravens fan, Orioles guy?
I used to be an Orioles fan when I was a kid. I don't really watch them anymore, but
it's rough nowadays, especially this year. Yeah. But yeah, man, good to have you on. It's by a total accident of circumstance. You happen to be from my old stomping grounds. We connected on a different site, and I loved what you had to say about men in relationship. You have some very specific thoughts on how we as men need to move on from a lot of the things we were taught as children, our ways of thinking, our views towards women, our views towards relating to each other as people, how we indeed need to move on from that kind of thinking when we grow up. And you're saying that a lot of us think we have, but we may not have. And some of that may be kind of stalking us, you know, kind of in stealth mode. And you're out to shine a light on how men as adults, especially in relationships with women, should be thinking compared to how we thought when we were little boys. Talk a little bit more about your whole thought process on that. And I'm sure that'll take us in lots of wonderful directions in terms of specifics and actionable ways guys can move on this. But I really want to hear your thoughts on this because, frankly, they're fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a couples therapist, and I practice something called imago therapy, and it really deals a lot with the childhood and the messages that we get growing up. And we get messages in society about what it means to be a man. And they're not even necessarily things that we maybe recall as growing up, but just like the marketing or health. And it's definitely changed since we were younger. I mean, nowadays, and even in the family culture, the messages our parents give us. So like, let's say we get a message like, big boys don't cry. So even though no one ever maybe said that comment, but the message is kind of like anytime we would get upset, maybe our parents would say we're too sensitive, or don't let it bother you, or you're drawing attention to yourself. And then what that does is, even though we're not aware of that as a kid, but what it does is we have that message like it's not okay to feel, it's not okay to, and we have that message and it internalizes within us. And maybe it doesn't make a big difference, but we see that it actually winds up becoming some of the issues that you have in your mature adult relationships with women, because you'll probably be attracted to someone who is a lot more the opposite, more emotional, like very emotional. If you were told not to be emotional, because they have your lost parts. So it's almost like you're missing half. In order to become whole, you need to be able to reclaim that. So in the beginning of a relationship, when you fall in love, that's going to be pretty clear. I can just to speak a little bit personally, I got some of those messages, and I think, I used to get picked on in school, and I was a little bit more sensitive, I guess, and it was hard. Now as a parent, I see what it's like, and I can have more compassion on my parents, and I realize they did the best they could. But like I'd come home every single day, and this person bothered me, and this person did this, and then my mom would just say like, you're letting them know it bothers you. You're drawing attention to yourself. Like, don't let it bother you. You're too sensitive. And that's the message that I got. Like, Don't have feelings, even though she didn't say that, but that's the message. But it's not that I really, it still bothered me, these things, but I just shut down a part of myself. And then when I met my wife, who is like major, like big personality, like enough emotions for the both of us, I was very attracted. I wasn't aware of that's why I liked her so much, but that was one of the things that drew me towards her. And then though, that was one of the things that we wound up fighting a lot about, because when she had those big emotions, when when she was loved me and was sharing positive feelings, that felt great. But once she started getting angry and upset with me, after we already got married or after even we got engaged, then that was very scary. And that went back to that little boy where, oh, this is not safe. Feelings aren't okay. This is really uncomfortable.
Plus, you feel attacked again.
And you feel attacked. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not pleasant to be on the receiving end of that, but it's, it's that very thing that I wanted, but it's the very thing that I actually don't want, because once all the chemicals of romantic love wear away and you start to see things for how they really are, you start realizing this is really scary, and those old messages come back. So you might think, like, if you're starting a relationship now or you're in that romantic stage, you might think that, it's not going to be a problem. But once you commit and you begin to see that these things are really going to come back to haunt you, and until you deal with them, it's going to impact your relationship.
Part of that stands out for me is you had these experiences as a kid, and thank you for being so vulnerable about that, because I think a lot of people would grow up and not want to admit that they were that kid. And yet you do bring those memories, you bring what happened into adulthood, and you may say, yeah, well, I sloughed that off. I'm a real man now. That doesn't matter anymore. But when you enter into a situation that kind of feels exactly emotionally and has the texture of that situation you had growing up, it's easy to kind of regress into those thought patterns and to that emotional state. And, as much as we'd like to think we have control over it, it may even be sort of automatic.
It is.
It may be, something that's unconscious. And here's the thing. Your poor wife has no way of knowing this. She wasn't the one who picked on you, when you're in school. She's trying to love you. It's just she's upset right now, and she's got her own feelings, and she's got everything she's bringing from her childhood in. And it's not like you're going to sit here and be, throw all your cards on your table and all your guns on the shelf on the table and say, hey, look, here's everything bad that happened to me growing up. I mean, that typically isn't part of the courtship process, right? So here you are. Once it hits the fan someday, you have all these hidden emotions, these latent emotional states that just kind of bubble up to the surface. And then you got to deal with them somehow. Right?
Yeah. And not being aware of them, we were stuck in a power struggle. I mean, that's how I got into this work, actually, because we were having trouble. We were in this power struggle, which is, normal for every couple after that romantic phase. But we didn't understand where it was coming from. And we just thought maybe we were in the wrong relationship. So once we did the work together, we were able to be more aware of each other's childhood and also take responsibility for it. So instead of we say if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if something really bothers you in your relationship, it's probably more about you. It's probably maybe 90% about you and 10% about the other person. And this is a huge thing because we just spend so much time, I find, like blaming other people for our problems. And it makes sense, if you feel like they're not nice to you, it's very easy for you to just kind of put the blame on them. But ultimately, the only thing we can do to change is ourselves. And taking ownership and being aware of that gives us the ability to choose how we're going to respond instead of just come from a place of reactivity, which is, as you said before, it's very unconscious. We're not even aware of what's going on in our inner world. And we think that we can get beyond it. We think we can get beyond it, but you can't really fully. Even if you've done an individual therapy, I've had people say, I thought I did all this work already about my childhood. I thought I was beyond it, and now I'm dealing it with my wife. It will pop up until you really address it.
Well, it's there. It's part of your history. It's part of who you are. I loved when you said, if it's hysterical, it's historical. We could be all macho and say, yeah, well, I've conquered this. It's in the past. It's in the rearview mirror. But that's okay until it isn't.
Yeah.
And we think that we're bigger than our entire history as human beings, but it is still there as part of us. It's almost like if we can embrace this in the hopes of understanding it, maybe we can deal with those emotions better when they bubble up to the surface, like I mentioned later on in adulthood, because at least we're not suppressing it, repressing it, pretending it didn't happen anymore. Now we at least have some self-awareness about it.
Exactly. So there's nothing wrong with being, we might feel like we have to be all macho and like we like have no issues or we dealt with them already. I'm not suggesting that you have to stay in the past and like say, woe is me and feel like a victim. No, this is your life is whatever happened to you happened. And not to feel, you don't have to feel bad about yourself, but just to be aware that it's not even necessarily even what happened. It's your experience of what happened is what's etched into your brain and it's going to follow you in all of your relationships. So just being aware of that empowers you to make a real conscious choice instead of pretending that you've made the choice, but you're still reacting and going from, 0 to 60 and, at the drop of a hat.
I love where this conversation is going because we haven't really ever talked in depth on this show before about how it's one thing to live in the past, blame everybody, be a victim. Oh, woe is me. This happened to me. Everybody else was born with privilege and I wasn't. So I have this massive disadvantage because of everything that happened to me and how I was abused and how I was kept from being. It's one thing to be a victim and live in the past, but that doesn't mean the pendulum has to swing all the way the other way. And we go, hey, that doesn't matter. I'm bigger than that. And put on this big macho front like that was never me. That never happened. Sweep it under the carpet. Never talk about it again. If I hear you correctly, Shlomo, there's a way to acknowledge the past and the history and say, hey, nobody's perfect. No parents are perfect. Siblings can be a real pain in the ass. But, as far as me, this is where I'm coming from. Here's who I want to be today. Here's the journey that I've gone on. I'm proud of the self-work I've done as a man. I know where I stand today as a man. I know what I'm no longer susceptible to. I know the bad habits I've conquered. Yet, I am going to have the self-awareness to not just sweep that past under the carpet, but to understand, hey, you know what? This could come rear its ugly head out of nowhere. And if I don't recognize it when it's showing up because I'm in denial of it, things could be worse than better. And I love that because that brings into play that magical word balance.
Yeah.
I'm balancing where I came from with where I am today. I understand the journey. I acknowledge the journey instead of saying, look, who I am today is all there is. Let's just pretend I was always that way and everything else can just, disappear into oblivion. I love this mindset. And my question to you right now is how do we know if we're on the right track there? What are some warning signs we as guys may want to face up to that would tell us, hey, you know what? You're trying to push all this down. You're trying to not admit what happened to you versus, hey, you know what? It's okay to feel these things as long as you have that self-awareness. I mean, how do we as guys find that balance is what I'm asking you.
Well, finding the balance is like you have to be aware. Like, do you pretend that your childhood was like perfect? Like, you could think you have great parents. We're not saying that you think that your parents were horrible, but like, did you experience? Like, let's say you had parents that had very, very important jobs, and they were not home a lot. They were working very late hours. As an adult, you realize that it makes sense why they weren't home. But as a child, you may have felt like you were ignored. They weren't trying to ignore you. It's just this was the circumstances. But if you felt that you were ignored, you're gonna have that feeling of being ignored is gonna follow you. So you don't have to whitewash the past and make it look like it was perfect. I have nothing wrong, enough, no issues, everything's great. Like if you start doing that and it's with rose-colored glasses, I would say like I'm gonna be aware of that. On the other hand, if you're just blaming your parents for everything and it's just your whole life is horrible because your parents your whole mission is like people have made their whole lives about like their mental illness and I mean struggles that they have, and that's like who they are and that's their identity. And you know I think there's a lot of victim. The society is, on the one hand, we don't want to go to the opposite extreme. It's great that people are getting help. People are, especially men, because men, it's like men don't necessarily like to go to therapy. A lot of times the woman has to drag them along to
Yeah,
talk about our feelings. It's not something that we're necessarily good at. So why would we want to go sit in a room with our wife and already kind of fail?
it's
But
true.
so we want to, but it's a great thing that men are doing more work, but we want to be wary of going to the opposite extreme where it's all about me and all about my problems, and I'm just like, I'm kind of, I don't know, suffering for until I'm like 80, 90, 100 years old. I'm just miserable because I'm in my whole, I'm this victim. So we have to, as you said, create a balance where we take that information, be aware of it, and also be grateful that this is the journey I needed to go on. What I wish, I would not be the man I am today if I didn't have to go through my experiences, and to be able to look at it from that perspective, so that everything was perfectly coordinated, exactly orchestrated, exactly the way I needed it to be to get to this place in my life. If you can have that perspective, it's a lot healthier than either feeling like a victim or pretending that nothing happened.
Well, one of the things you talked about is extremely important for all of us to remember. We've all gone through it. And anybody who says, hey, my childhood was perfect, they're full of it. You show me a person who says that, and I'm going to show you someone who's engaging in this repression exercise that we've been talking about so far. Something's bottled up in there because nobody has a perfect childhood, especially from their own perspective. And yet here we are, a bunch of guys trying to avoid going to therapy, trying to avoid going to any doctor. Hey, look, whatever symptom I have, physical, psychological, it's going to go away. I don't even want to know if I'm sick. Just let me live my life. Leave me in peace. And that has disastrous results if it's left to fester long term. Meanwhile, here we are talking about familial influences, and rightly so. And I mean, that's right where you live, as a rabbi. But man, look at the societal influences. 8 years ago, we were told, believe all women. The future is female. All masculinity is toxic. Sit down, shut up, stay in your lane. Well, if we're not supposed to be masculine as men, what are we supposed to be? Just sit down, shut up, and do better. That's what we were told. And meanwhile, I think a lot of women took that to heart. They're like, yeah, you know what? I can't be wrong. I am to be believed. All men, meanwhile, are all jerks. I am being validated in my belief system that I am a victim to all men, thinketh all of these women nowadays. Well, we went through COVID and realized, hey, you know what? It kind of sucks to be locked down alone. We really do kind of need each other. I kind of miss having someone of the other gender around. Then we all got released from our COVID bondage. We're back out in society and we're all rusty socially. But we're still left with this stinking thinking that we've been taught over the last couple of decades about how men and women are supposed to be adversarial instead of being in partnership. And how, yeah, you know what? Now that we're alone and have nobody to depend on, click on social media, click on CNN, click on Fox News, see what they have to say about me and my life and what vaccines I should be taking, et cetera, et cetera. And then, we're fed the headlines that are going to sell and drive a certain narrative, and people have lost their ability to think critically on top of having this baggage from growing up emotionally. And we've been put at odds with the kind of person we're actually sexually attracted to. And you start building that three-legged stool, it's going to be hard to sit down on it without a whole lot of pain. So, you have these societal elements. You have men and women being adversarial towards each other, plus all the baggage we grew up with. It'd be easy for all of us to kind of be the men going our own way and saying, well, heck with it. I'm just going to watch porn and I'm not going to care anymore. Yet that's not a fulfilling way to live. What you're talking about, being men and women in partnership, getting along, having a family, making our own kids someday complain about their childhood, right? This is, well, I'm going to go ahead and say it because you're a rabbi. I mean, this is intelligent design. This is how God designed it. Go forth and multiply. Yet, man, it just seems like we've got everything being weaponized against us to keep us from being able to have a decent relationship with our spouse. I mean, 100 years ago, did couples need to go to therapy like they need to go today? Shlomo, I mean, what happened here?
It's a good question. People always like to ask. I do think that I think we can afford to, if you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Of
you need to get your
course.
basic needs met first: safety, food, shelter. Once you have all of that, then you can afford to be worried about actually having love. So I think people were in relationships, and I'm not sure if I think that they were good. They were good. They didn't need anything more. Now we're so complicated. We have everything. We're such an affluent society
We were so
compared to any other.
blessed. We got to
Yeah.
complain about something.
Right now we have something to complain about. So like I'm not feeling fulfilled. I need more. But it becomes also very selfish because it's all about me, and it's not really love. If love is not about I love you because I love you. I don't really love you. I just feel good with you, meaning you make me feel good. And when you're not nice to me, you don't make me feel good, then maybe it's over. So learning how to be able to give to another person and to be there for another person, whether or not you get something in return, it's a much more mature. That's what real love is about. And I don't think that's not what they show you on Hollywood. I think society, unfortunately, with just compared to the last, you said 10 years, 20 years with social media and just bombarding us with these messages, much as we had advertisements and TV, but this is just like overboard, just indoctrinating people. And I think in general, they've been, by making the distinctions, whether it's between gender or like race and what they've been doing, it been whoever, I don't know who's behind all this, but driving us all apart. And as you said, with men and women driving us apart and making us, destroying the family, or looking at the family as not something that's a noble cause, something that has built, this country in America, and which is going to, I guess, allow for the country to continue. If we don't have families, then you don't have citizens. So I think that trying to stay, knowing what we know and trusting ourselves, what's really right, and sticking to our values, and not kind of getting caught up in whatever the media wants to promote to us and tell us what's right or wrong, or what's praiseworthy or not. I think it's been quite dangerous and damaging, as you said, to the male and to the male-female relationship.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind is one that's pretty well traveled around here: transactional.
Yeah.
When men and women are getting in relationships thinking, what do I get out of this? It's easy to forget there's another person thinking the same thing. And if I am in a transactional relationship, all right, then I'm constantly negotiating with this other person to see what I can get and what I have to concede in this great compromise we're calling allegedly a good relationship. I think that's become somehow normalized nowadays,
Yeah.
when in reality, being in a relationship because of love and joy and giving to others, and how am I going to make the life of someone I love better, and also my kids, right? How can I act in the best interest of my wife and my kids, and how does that make me feel more like a man who's a provider and a protector? It just seems like that just grew wings and flew away. People don't even think like that anymore. And yet, that is the secret to a great relationship, is being there for each other. Because then the sum of the parts are not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 = 5 or 6 or 50, which I've said around here. If all you're ever going to get from this relationship is what you can negotiate out of it, then all you're ever going to get is what you expected.
Yeah.
All those wonderful, unexpected joys and blessings from a male-female relationship are just never even going to have been given oxygen in a transactional setting. So let me run something by you, Shlomo.
Sure.
I bet you see the same thing. Everybody wants to use the N-word, narcissist. And to me, a lot of times whenever we see someone blame someone else for being a narcissist, it seems like the one talking is more of the narcissistic one. This person isn't giving me what I want because they're so narcissistic. I've literally, that's a rough paraphrase of what I've actually heard before. This person's a narcissist because they won't give me what I want. Now, there are a lot of people who are people pleasers and, Mr. Nice Guy types who get run roughshod over by narcissists. And this audience is mostly male, remember, so that's the vein in which I talk. Obviously, it's not gender specific. But the person who's a narcissist, who's very selfish, loves to make the other person feel bad for not giving them what they wanted. And when we have two people in a relationship both trying to get what they want all the time, then it just becomes a big power play instead of a true relationship. And yet, this has become normalized as well. So this is why everybody's blaming everybody else for being a narcissist. I had a guy not too long ago come to me and he said, I'm in therapy and everybody calls me the narcissist, but I kind of think that my wife's the one being the narcissist.
Mm.
I said, well, let's put this to the test. I said, you told me there are a lot of things you did to make her happy. You know, she wanted something done with the house. She wanted a baby, and you kind of had sweaty palms about that, but you did it anyway. You're doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily on your own radar screen just to make her happy. What are you getting out of this relationship? And he paused and he couldn't answer the question. He goes, I never even thought about it. Everything I do is for her and it's never good enough. I said, I think you've answered the question. You know, if she loves you, she's going to do things for you because she loves you. She's going to care about your happiness. She's going to care about your well-being. She's going to want to see you smile. She's going to want to see you relax instead of being stressed out all the time. And I said, here's another question. You said that she has times when she's really nice to you. She's really sweet. And other times she just turns into a raging, horrible person to be with. How much is that dependent on whether she's getting what she wants out of you or not? And he was like, oh my gosh. Wow, is that a poignant question? Because whenever I'm being Mr. Nice Guy and giving her what she wants and she gets to do this and there's not a whole lot of boundaries, she talks about me like, in hushed tones and I'm wonderful and great. But as soon as I say, hey, look, my back hurts. I just had surgery. Can I please not go chop a cord of wood for the fire? Oh, well, then you don't love this family. And you don't love me and you're an awful person. See, when she doesn't get what she wants, even though you have needs and she lashes out at you, that's the difference. It's always about them. And I think yet in relationships, we've been taught to believe that's a good thing. You should get what you want out of a relationship. Make that man give you what you want, say all these lady gurus out there. But it's just driving us to divorce court, isn't it?
Look, if a relationship's really about being in a relationship with with someone other than ourselves, really being able to learn how to interact with another person and to focus on giving and creating that space that we share in between. And if we're just focusing on ourselves, then, we're going to be pretty miserable. And I mean, I don't like the terms, there's so much pathologizing. People go on Google today and they
Agreed.
label everyone. And I think we all are self-absorbed to some extent. I mean, we need to be to survive. We need to take care of our needs, but we need to eat, sleep, drink, protect ourselves. But because of our childhood wounds, what we do is we build up these structures to protect ourselves, and it's a lot easier to feel safer when everyone thinks and does the same thing that we do, and gives us focus on ourselves and getting our needs met. Sometimes it's scary to be in a relationship with someone that's very different than ourselves, even though in the beginning they might feel very similar. How can I give to this person? But that's where the growth happens. So yeah, I mean, it's really reprogramming ourselves to think about what is a relationship really about? What is love really about? And it's, I think that the advertising, it's like, if you buy this car, you're going to look really, you're going to be a real man. Or if you, smoke this cigarette, or you drink this soda, like that's what the marketing is about. Like about getting, how we can get our needs met and how we can become greater when we get those needs. And it's very self-indulgent type of, society that we've kind of been brought up in.
And that's nothing new.
Yeah.
That's as old as media itself. I mean, I just watched the biopic about Ferruccio Lamborghini, which, by the way, was probably the worst product-centered biopic I've ever seen. Not a very good movie. But it reminded me of how Lamborghini, as a mark, as a sports car brand, was born out of Lamborghini's frustration with Ferrari. He had made enough money selling tractors that he bought himself a Ferrari, and he just couldn't stand the clutch, et cetera, et cetera. And at that time, Enzo Ferrari's marketing pitch was, when you want to be someone, buy a Ferrari. And when Lamborghini launched his car at the, I guess, 64 Milan auto show, he rolled out the tagline, when you already are someone, you buy a Lamborghini. Much to Enzo Ferrari's chagrin. He's fuming on the other side of the floor next to his car. But it's the same message. You're buying my car to to kind of fill this hole in your life that's missing until you buy it. And that's always been the goal of marketing, and unfortunately, it's been very good at brainwashing us into kowtowing to it. But nowadays, it just seems like it's a little different. It seems like you've bravely mentioned that there's sort of an assault on the family. And when the man of the house isn't there and the family unit isn't there, something else is going to be in charge, and all that's left is government. And we've seen that movie before, and it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
What would you tell the men listening who have maybe gotten a little bit of a wake-up call from this podcast, Shlomo, and are thinking, well, my goodness, what are the warning signs? How can I indeed do better? Not just, I guess, the jingoistic socio-political perspective of sit down, shut up, stay in your lane. But what if I really want to do something better? What if I really want to improve? What if I really want better field sense into all this? What are some simple steps I can do after watching or listening to this podcast right now to improve things?
Well, I mean, one thing is if you're in relationship with, if you're married, being able to have a safe conversation with your wife, to tell her what you're feeling, and if you feel like she's talking to you in a disrespectful way, in a nice way, to be able to share that with her. But being that you might not be able to do that, or you might not be in a relationship, just learning what can I do to focus on how I communicate with others. How can I talk in a way where I'm not blaming, I'm not criticizing, I'm just sharing my perspective. I'm taking ownership. So, for example, like using I statements, not in a standoffish way, but just like saying, taking ownership for your feelings and your thoughts, and being very careful.
As opposed to blaming.
Yeah, instead of blaming other people. That's
not I want this, or I need this, or me. It's more in terms of I'm taking ownership. I'm anti-victimhood.
Yeah, or like, when this happened, I felt, as opposed to like, you don't love me, you don't care about me, because that doesn't set up a healthy relationship, and that will gain you more respect also.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk like that.
What if she just piles on? What if she isn't playing with you?
So some of it's just like, don't say. Sometimes like, don't even say anything, or that makes a lot of sense. And you can just like listen to her. You don't mean you have to agree with her, but you don't have to tell her I agree or disagree. Just we teach couples how to mirror, like to repeat back what they say and validate what they're saying. But in a situation where you can't do that, you could just listen to hear it and say, that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you're really angry, and you can say, and you can try to take ownership for something that you did do. There might be a part of it. There's probably some kernel of truth there, even if it's more about her stuff and it's not fair how she's talking to you. But just take ownership. That makes sense, because I did come home late, or I didn't call you from work, and it makes sense you'd be angry. You don't need to give an excuse. You don't need to defend yourself, because, again, realizing it's more about, if someone's, again, the same with the hysterical, if she's being hysterical, it's more historical. It's not what you did. So you don't really need to defend yourself. So trying to get out of that defensive mode where we feel like we have to defend everything we've done, and just kind of take
being
ownership.
Defensive never works.
It doesn't work, no.
The question that comes to mind is, at what point in your relationship, assuming early on, should you broach the subject with your partner? Hey, here's what my childhood was like. Here's some things that might come out. And when it does come out, I don't want it to come out. I'm trying to change. How can we hold each other accountable? What can we learn about each other? Not to weaponize it against each other in an argument, but just to build our relationship. Is there a time and a place for that?
It's tricky, because, one of the things when I work with couples, I really tell them it's all about safety. We need to create that emotional safety, because people tend to bring up something, and let's say someone talks about their childhood, and then the next week their wife will say, well, that's like your mother, you're just reacting to me like your mother.
Well, that's
You don't want to,
weaponizing it
yeah, you're
though.
weaponizing it, right? So it has to be, it has to be really safe. And every relationship's different, so it's hard to, you can't give a, you have to be extremely careful about it, because I don't want to encourage men to just open up and be vulnerable and then they get kind of whipped with it. So I think you have to know yourself, you have to know your partner, and know kind of how safe you can feel together talking about these things. Obviously, if you go to a professional, and not all professionals are safe either, but if you go to a professional where they teach you how to have a safe conversation and explore this, that's probably going to be the safest way to do it. But if you try to do it on your own, just like I would say, just use your discretion and say, look, I really want to work on this relationship with you. I want to be the best that I can, and I want to share with you some of the things that happened to me growing up that have impacted me, and some that or might become trigger points for me in our relationship.
Yeah, it does sound tricky because you don't want to make yourself vulnerable in the bad way when you think you're making yourself vulnerable in the good way.
Exactly, because that's what people do, use it against you, depending on the spouse.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you have to have a couple who's wanting to act in each other's best interests, at least on the surface, when they first start, or why go into the relationship to begin with. And I think a lot of times people get into relationships when they're not relationship ready, or, get into a relationship with someone who's clearly not relationship ready because they let that chemistry cloud their judgment, and think, oh, well, she's really hot. So, we're going to get over whatever else is wrong with her. And, here you are a couple of years later, you're still married. You're going to have to figure this out. And it isn't always so easy. Yeah. I love what you have to say. I think this has been a wonderful show. We could go on and on. I'm going to have you back so we could continue this discussion. Would you be willing to return?
Love to come back, Scott. Yeah.
His name is Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, and he is from Pikesville, Maryland, and he is the founder of the Marriage Restoration Project. And when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Shlomo, 6 letters, not 7, there's no C, Shlomo, and that's actually Solomon in English, right?
Right.
Shlomo, yeah. I think a lot of guys think, okay, this kind of sounds like slow motion, with a New York twang, and but that is actually Hebrew for Solomon, which is a man of peace and wisdom, which is a great name actually. And so when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/SHLOMO, you will be magically teleported to the marriagerestorationproject.com. Rabbi Shlomo, what will they find when they get there?
We have a lot of resources. Besides the services that we provide, we do private intensives for couples, and also we have a self-study program that you can do with your partner or by yourself, even, to work on your relationship. We also have other resources there that you can read more to learn more about how to be your best self in your relationship.
Wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Once again, Rabbi Shlomo, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Great conversation.
Thanks, Scott. It's great meeting you.
Yeah, likewise. And gentlemen, go on over to mountaintoppodcast.com. Visit our 3 longtime sponsors, Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine, the Hero Soap Company, and the Keyport. Keyport's got great new titanium stuff, by the way. And Hero Soap has shampoo. If you have not tried the Hero Soap shampoo yet, gentlemen, it comes like in a little round bar, and you're thinking this thing's going to be gone by tomorrow morning if I use it twice. Oh no. 3 little swipes on your head, especially, if you got high and tight cut like me. But I had a little bit longer hair not too long ago. 3 swipes on the hair and it'll foam up. You don't have to lather, rinse, and repeat. All you do is lather and rinse. And the thing lasts for like a month, and it smells great, and it's good for you. It doesn't have the fake chemicals and so forth. So check that out from the guys at Hero Soap. Whether you work with Origin, the Keyport, or Hero Soap, use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get 10% off extra with any of our 3 longtime sponsors. Also, guys, if you haven't been on my Substack lately, go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Substack, where I kind of let the fur fly. I tell the truth on some things, on some topics I don't usually talk about. Those of you who have checked it out have given me good feedback on that. Give me some ideas, too. So they'll be coming at you soon. If you haven't gotten on my phone and talked to me about the show, where you're at with your success with women or getting better as a man, I'd love to hear from you. Get on my phone by going to, or Zoom actually, by going to mountaintoppodcast.com and signing up for a 25-minute slot on my calendar. And you'll talk to me personally. If it makes sense to put together a coaching program, that's great too. But all of that and more is there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X and Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.